Good afternoon or good evening to everybody. I am so excited on behalf of the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society to introduce our webinar speaker, Professor Ali Hassami. Amongst many things that he is, he's Chair and Technical Editor of the IEEE 7000 Standard, Vice Chair and Process Architect for IEEE Ethics Certification Programme for Autonomous and Intelligent Systems, and also a Director at Vega Systems, London in the United Kingdom. I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but I'm sure we're so delighted to welcome Professor Hassami here. And I will now hand over to you for an amazing webinar on ethical and societal implications of artificial intelligence.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction, Keely. I'm really grateful for this invitation to share the experience of many years of work at IEEE that's gone into caring for societal impact of artificial intelligence. And I'm only sharing a snapshot of the initiatives and the activities and the principal aspects of that with the audience through this Computational Intelligence Society lecture. With that in mind, I would commence the talk on the basis that we need, as technologists, engineers, and people responsible in whatever capacity, to care about social impact of whatever we do. And this is fortunately become a recent focus. The fact is, we haven't had the means and tools and the instruments for achieving this until now. So as a quick overview, I'll give a quick introduction to IEEE. I don't think that's really necessary for the current audience. I apologize. Only a short intro, then focus in a bit of scene setting in terms of where the AI technology is going and globally, where are the main centers of activity. Talk about certain initiatives at IEEE Standard Association on standardization for ethics of technology, as well as the key focus on what we call an ethics certification program, which is complementary to standardization. For most of you, IEEE is not a new entity. If not all are members, and those who aren't, probably you're not in technical disciplines, because it's kind of an indispensable society that would follow you throughout your life and support you, with more than 400,000 global members and presence in virtually as many countries, short of few, that there are members of United Nations. IEEE Standard Association has been the main driver behind some of the initiatives that I'm sharing with you, and there are main entity within IEEE who are involved in developing global technology standards, currently 1,500 or so on the in the name of IEEE, and just to mention one that you all know, 802.11 and 802.15, the communication standards, Wi-Fi, WiMAX, etc., all IEEE standards. Right, going and talking about ethics requires a bit of clarification, so I start by just throwing in a couple of definitions. And the distinction between ethics and morals, and what we are mainly worried about, autonomous systems that now going to dominate our environment and our lives. And ethics is largely epistemology of knowledge. It's a kind of a discipline where it deals with principles that underpin our considerations of right and wrong. So ethics is really a branch of science and knowledge, and morals are the decisions that we make on the basis of these principles that help us end up on the right side of hopefully humanity and society in acceptable behavior. An autonomous system is one that basically makes decisions without much human validation or intervention. And that's become recently quite significant in the context of artificial intelligence that's going to run autonomy. So an autonomous system makes decisions without authorization by humans. It can act and make changes in the real physical world based on those decisions, and then decide to adapt and modify its future decisions based on the feedback and consequential interactions that it gets from the real physical world. Where are we with this technology? It's basically regarded as the innovation of the century, and I honestly feel that's probably also an understatement. We are probably struggling to find any innovation that has managed to, within a few years, to embed itself and with the prospects of near future, actually act as a proxy for humanity, make decisions without consulting us, without anyone supervising, being in charge, etc. So there is a significant concern, and some people regard it as humanity's greatest innovation since the year dot, since the invention of the wheel. Currently, it's significant enough that many countries have strategies for this technology. You probably don't remember anything else resembling this. Nobody developed strategies for mobile telephony. No one developed strategies for, I don't know, not as many countries simultaneously about invention of steam engine and traction or steam traction, etc. So it's taken very seriously. In terms of publications, my apologies, we also get an increasing number of roughly 300,000 publications a few years ago, and you can imagine that number is constantly on the rise. And the geographic context of these publications, almost 40% come from the People's Republic of China, 20% from the rest of the global community, and the numbers from US and European Union also much smaller. So you can imagine there's a significant attention paid to this technology in the Far East. The conference publications roughly follow a similar kind of pattern in terms of number of papers and publications, conference publications, in terms of world total of these publications, largely coming from the Far East and very little from the rest of the world. In terms of top 10 publishers as of a couple of years ago, when you look at it again, the figures that you have seen earlier are born bearing testimony why most of these come, or much attention and focus is on this technology in the People's Republic of China. I've had the honor of working with some universities in China and gone and promoted the ethics of technology in that country extensively, and I can assure you that there is significant interest on that side as well, on the ethics of AI and technology. So you can see for yourself, many of the publications in terms of top 10 ranking publications other than MIT come from People's Republic. There are a number of significant machine learning systems in the world, and this is where the statistics are rather different, with the US and the UK being in the leading positions in terms of large-scale, significant machine learning systems that have been developed, and in terms of geographic areas of 2020, basically early 2000s to 2022. And spread of the publications on AI, fortunately, largely relate to education context, again, with the lion's share going to People's Republic of China. And then we have industrial and not-for-profit and government sectors coming next. So again, some of these statistics, a couple of years old, but they are reasonably indicative of the trends. And also looking at the way ethical concerns as far as deployment of this technology goes, in terms of even a count on number of publications and research papers, is largely, you can see on the x-axis, the ethical focus of publications. Biggest concern has been matters of intrusion into private space of citizens, followed by matters of human agency, equality, security, transparency, autonomy, etc. The other facet of AI being considered as a massive global opportunity, as well as a potential threat to some of the ethical issues that we have so far looked at, is emergence of legal regulatory instruments to control it, to put some safeguards for the benefit of society, etc. Unfortunately, that has been reasonably slow, and the numbers are really not as good as we would expect, considering that we all now have had access to major launch of AI platforms for almost a year, and the technology has been around for much longer, naturally. Going into ethics publications, you can again see that many of the issues, worries on publication as far as ethical impact goes, go back to privacy protection and matters of fairness. Remember, we are talking about autonomous systems. There's no human supervision, there's no human authorization, validation, etc. So suddenly machines making decisions about our fate become a matter of fairness, become a matter of explainability, openness, accountability in terms of who is to blame, who is accountable when things are under scrutiny, etc. So typically, the topics in AI ethics research typically rank in terms of the order that I have highlighted. Now, even the CEOs of major AI organizations and multinationals are really demanding that this is one technology where we want not sort of industry not to be the leading decision maker here. We want the regulators and the civic society to be involved and guard against any consequences, because somehow we can't tell what they are, and if they emerge, the chances are we are unable to control this. Now, just to look at few examples of if you like, ethical violations with the current state of technology, and this technology is constantly transforming and metamorphosizing into new variants. True that, for example, we had a case, I won't mention some of these commercial names, music streaming service that you subscribe to and pay for as well, took people's preferences and profiled them and sold that shamelessly as a valuable product to some nefarious use companies that we don't even know. So you subscribe to an internet service provider, to listen to music, and they, in a sense, shamelessly profile your psychological state based on what you're listening to, the timing, the sequence, the lengths, etc., and say, well, this is the mental state of this person, and put it on auction to other service organizations. And this is just one example of, if you like, lack of accountability and intrusion into people's private space without authorization, without consultation. And that is pretty much the flavor of many of these violations. No one's consulted, no one's been informed even of what's happening. We had another case where we have a bit of ethics washing, so to speak, where ethical capital with a private equity firm actually buys into pornographic servers and business. And if you look at places to invest ethically, you probably fall for the name of ethical capital and don't know that these guys are far from what they claim to be. Anyway, there are many examples of this. I'm just sharing few anecdotes from this. We actually hold and maintain a big list produced by one of my esteemed AI experts and colleagues, Dr. Watson, which actually details, God knows, many tens of these violations. Now, in terms of social impact, we are talking about a significant number of jobs being affected, not necessarily people being displaced, but those jobs gradually being influenced by impact of this technology in terms of bandwidth, in terms of capabilities. There is a massive forecast for global GDP rising by 7% when AI is fully deployed, but by all accounts, affecting 300 million jobs in virtually every industry you care to mention. We have never had an innovation, technological innovation, which has been so pervasive in terms of its impact. 300 million jobs, of course, across developed economies, and you can imagine for the rest of the world, the figure could be much bigger. And we are talking about a disruptive technology, to say the least. Some of the violations, for example, a company that operates in the social media space in the UK just simply didn't screen its underage users and ended up being fined roughly $15 million. But what's $15 million to these people? That's not even a fraction of their turnover annually globally. And the Information Commissioner in the UK found that that very company had about 1.5 million underage children using it until 2020. And they had a duty to make sure information was restricted to underage children. Now, the more recent forecast is roughly 1 billion global jobs, only a third of that in the developed countries, totally about 1 billion global jobs over a period of next 10 years is going to be affected. Affected means people would be gradually displaced. They need to learn new tricks, new talents, become pseudo data scientists, etc. And people may not all manage that transition that smoothly, depending on which phase of their life they are in and whether they are interested to go and learn a whole new bag of tricks in order to continue in a professional capacity. Of course, that's the downside. The upside is that a significant number of new jobs are going to also be created. but many of these new jobs are, if you like, tainted with knowledge of technology. So the service sector, many of the other roles in the social context are not going to easily be replaceable. Then we are also accounting for almost half of the job displacements with this technology. You can just cast your mind over any other innovation we've had, probably from invention of the wheel to motor vehicles, etc. We haven't really had that much displacement power by any technology. And interestingly, People's Republic of China, leading on many of those publications and interest indicators, is going to be itself affected in this displacement. The rest of the statistics speak for themselves. How much goes? 20 million in manufacturing, healthcare sector being affected. I mean, some of these are specialist, almost care industries that are being affected by the technology. And even jobs in the creative sectors, from editing movies to sculpture, painting, poetry, etc., are all affected, but those which have got interpersonal components are less likely to be as heavily affected as others. Unfortunately, the old-fashioned statistics on women having a higher risk of job loss also holds true with AI impact, and the forecast is that they would be prone to possibility of a slightly higher risk of losing their employment, whatever it is, from engineering to law to service sector engagement, etc. And overall, they think there is a gender polarity to impact on people, etc. Economically, also, we are seeing businesses replacing many of the human tasks, even the specialist ones in terms of IT and computer technology with AI-based solutions. Some major telecom companies reporting significant layoffs over the next few years. And again, the statistics for itself speaks for itself, that there is a strange sentiment that some people seem to prefer an independent AI over some politicians. So maybe that's a anecdote to bear in mind, that it may not be all doom and gloom, and there are potential for deployment of intelligent technologies to do better, less biased role for human society. Again, as we mentioned, the creative and emotional intelligence sector and skills are less prone to layoffs and direct impact by this technology, but there is a huge potential of work activities being automated, and many of the tasks lend themselves to automation or being replaced by totality of autonomous solutions. And AI is basically also a savior when it comes to monotonous tasks, that humans don't need to blindly keep turning the handle anymore. And many of these, in whatever sector they are actually doable by autonomous systems. Just taking a deep dive into history of mankind and say, well, this concept of ethics, why are we suddenly worried about it? And if we are worried about it, what's its origins? And I took a look at what's called Mithraic ethics, which was fundamentally something that developed in old Persia. And they had a pagan god, but they didn't believe in gods in the same style as the Greeks. The Persian deity that was deity for justice, and it actually led to what we call a social code rather than strictly a religion. And the social code was referred to as Mithraic or chivalry. And these principles were written in kind of a holy book called Avesta, and we're talking about 2000 BC. So we are talking about 4,000 years ago as an origin of some ethical codes of behavior, thought, and practice. Now, Mithra itself, by historians, interpreted to be a kind of a social contract. And it's interesting that Mithraism was regarded those days, 4,000 years ago, as a social contract, that Mithra itself was the deity which was supervising the exchange of this social contract, the practice of social contract, and encouraging people to stay true to that contract. And that led to an extremely egalitarian and, if you like, high degree of attaining and fair society 4,000 years ago in that land. And in a sense, it became amongst the first codes of ethics or codes of moral behavior. And when we talk about, if you like, social contract, we can only refer to Rousseau's 18th century social concern. But Rousseau's was largely social contract with respect to a role of rulers and authority over other citizens. So we have a fairly deep and ancient origin to these social codes. They are not just a byproduct of philosophers and recent times. Then when it comes to actually practice or understanding of these, those were the roots. There are fundamentally a number of ethical theories that underpin decision-making in the context of ethics. One is referred to as consequentialism or utilitarianism, and that was presented and developed by John Stuart Mill. And this was almost treating ethics and ethical behavior almost like an economic utility function. And it said, whatever you do, if it brings the maximum happiness and well-being to largest group of people, that's ethics for you. Maybe there is some element of truth in that, but each one of these ethical theories really tackle one particular perspective and degree of truth. The other school of thought comes from Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, or often referred to as deontological or duty ethics or categorical imperative. And it actually demands that the leaders and decision makers put themselves in the shoes of those who are going to be affected by their decisions, and their personal ethics that impacts on their decisions should be questioned in the light of, would you be happy to live in a setting that people are treated like that? So that's a duty based. So it's kind of a top down, whereas consequentialism is a kind of a bottom up type philosophy. And the one that comes from Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle, is the virtue ethics, where we are thinking often about human virtues, individual virtues of citizens, and whatever is ethical or unethical is largely decided whether it is adversely affecting the virtues of being good or honest or kind, etc. So if whatever we do is going to encourage people towards more dishonesty or harshness or violence, etc., is regarded as vice, which is the opposite of virtue. Now, going a bit further into technology domain of our own space, currently the main concerns are these 7 categories of ethical emergent properties of computing autonomous systems. Bias is one of those. In decision, remember, we are having decisions made independently and autonomously by AI agents now and in much more in future. And people are worried about these machines more or less replicating social biases on gender, I don't know, race, age, you name it, everything that exists as an undesirable bias in the human society is going to be replicated by these machines. Then it's also a question of explainability and transparency and sharing the information about decisions and why certain decisions are made, especially those affecting a large number of people. There's questions of responsibility and accountability. We also touched on earlier on looking at the number of global publications on matters of intrusion into people's private space, so-called privacy concerns. And then we come to matters of how technology development and deployment, for that matter, is managed responsibly or ethically. We often refer to that as responsible governance. And the more subtle concerns that interestingly appears even in the UK's UK government's white paper on approach to AI regulation on social scale is matters of fairness. Are these decisions fair or unfair? And humanity has got a very deep sense of this particular factor. Even children know what's fair or unfair if one of them received a lolly and the others didn't in similar circumstances. So it's a kind of a hardwired emotional reaction to effects and environment around ourselves. And there are old friends in technology that we have always had in terms of, is it safe enough? Is it has the potential to create accidents? Is it secure enough to be almost impervious to possibility of malicious intervention? And is it dependable? Is it reliable? Does it fail often, etc.? So these 7 categories are the main concerns. And then probably 8 years ago or so, IEEE SA decided through some visionary decision, frankly, and hats off to them, initiated a series of internal program under the banner of sort of technology ethics. One was developing a series of AI ethics standards, and I'm just sharing some of these with you here in this 7,000 series of standards. I had the honor and pleasure of being involved in the core standard IEEE 7000, which is now published, and it was made available for a while free of license concerns under Creative Commons license, I believe, or for non-commercial use. Most of the standards are in the final stages of just to give you a flavor, IEEE 7000 took well over 5 years to produce. So these standards are really groundbreaking in the sense that they were commenced and appeared at the time that no one else had anything to offer. And now, of course, there are many global standard development organizations who are heavily involved in standardization, both in technical terms as well as social impact dimension. So 7000 is a model process for factoring in ethics during system design. And we'll make a quick reference to that. All the rest of the members of this family are in development. Most of them are published by now. The latest one, the one highlighted here, is IEEE 7009, which is a standard for how to design fail-safe system when you have an autonomous and semi-autonomous system. Just a quick introduction to IEEE 7000. it was probably the first global standard to bring the concept of ethics into how you design technological artifacts, software, hardware, integration, you name it. And this standard fundamentally comprises 4 core processes. One that encourages people to explore the context of whatever it is they are developing a technological solution for. Secondly, to encourage people to elaborate and consult the stakeholders, all those affected, about values and what values are going to be affected by that technology, and prioritize those ethical values, then turn those ethical values into some form of what we call ethical requirement specs, and mix those ethical requirements alongside many other engineering requirements, such as reliability, functional requirements, safety requirements, commercial requirements, and then go about developing a risk-based design solution, risk-based design that actually additionally incorporates those ethical concerns. So IEEE 7000, which was published in 2021 and then recently adopted by ISO and IEC global standardization organizations as a global standard, is no longer just an IEEE standard. Slightly modified, is called ISO IEC IEEE 24748-7000 standard. It actually provides reasonable guidance on how to incorporate ethical value requirements in the way you are designing technology. And we have added a few artifacts to this standard, including what we call a case for ethics. So it's not just people coming and claiming that, yes, we follow this standard, trust us, our product is adequately ethical. There is a structure that I have embedded as the technical editor of the standard in it, that people have to articulate how do they consult, where did they get the ethical values from, how much of it was designed for and protected in design, etc. So it's more or less a formal ethics rather than claim and soft approach to it. The other one is the 7009, which is telling you how to make sure any autonomous system in the event of failure actually fails on the safe side rather than unknown or indeterminate state and cause harm. Other standard organizations, specifically ISO and IEC, and the European Electrotechnical Standardization Organization, SANELEC, have embarked over the past few years on a massive scale on developing application, regulatory, and business-related standards for AI. And one famous one is the Subcommittee 42 of ISO IEC, which has got a huge program of standardization, far too many to mention in a short talk here. And many of that work is still on the go. But frankly, if I am honest, on the ethical dimension only, not technology dimension in terms of data and algorithm design and so-called trustworthiness, IEEE probably still have one of the most leading and progressive set of standards. There are other sector standards such as functional safety. Functional safety has been tradition of most of the safe systems that we have had for many years in medical application, in transportation, etc. So there is a whole body of global initiatives going towards a standardization of AI, and frankly, not a moment too soon for this. We need a lot more of those in place, but we need a lot more as far as social impact and ethical dimension is concerned. And for this, IEEE SA started, other than those 7000 series standards, a new program called Ethics Certification Program for Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. And AIS, or Autonomous Intelligent Systems, is IEEE's speak for AI. At the time, that is 2018, that I was honored to be asked to lead this particular program for IEEE. The interest was, how can we tell there is sufficient accountability, there is sufficient treatment of potential algorithmic bias, and there is sufficient transparency in an AI application. And ideally, we not only want to be able to tell, but we also want to be able to assess, evaluate, assess, and certify for these. So that was quite a challenging task. So naturally, similar to any other standardization, we formed some global representative expert groups for accountability, bias, and transparency based on what people managed to declare in terms of their backgrounds and competencies. And we embarked on developing predictors and metrics rather than writing narratives, which most standards are all about. So we ended up at the end of this task in having ethical foundational requirements for that describe and it enables us to measure how much transparency and accountability or algorithmic bias there is or is missing from a given product or service, and if you like, facilitating the possibility of ethics certification through IEEE as a global respected independent body. So it was quite difficult. I was at the same time involved in the development of IEEE 7000, was still struggling after a few years with a large global participation. So what I knew was that developing these metrics and predictors should be reasonably different to writing another standard. Otherwise, we're just replicating the same stuff in a different language. So for accountability, we formed the expert group where started mind mapping rather than actually deciding how many chapters we need and creating subgroups to go and write those chapters. So we ran live sessions of experts and captured their thoughts on what are the principal factors that positively or adversely impact accountability. So developed a kind of a mind map, force field diagram. Unfortunately, little time to go into philosophy of this approach and elaboration of it. Just suffice to the fact that accountability was defined by a number of predictors that either positively or adversely affected it, and each one of those predictors could be decomposed into its own predictors, almost like fractal mathematics, and we ended up with a whole range of predictors for accountability. We did the same thing for matters of transparency. Again, a different expert group. We defined what are the factors that help us define transparency, and the same for algorithmic bias. So we ended up in a very rapid process, taking no more than about 7 months, as opposed to developing standards, which, as I illustrated, took nearly 5 years. And we developed these 3 suites of metrics that basically defined what it was that we had to check, what was it that we could measure and mark and decide whether there was sufficient transparency, accountability, and bias. And where we are now, we have added to those original 3 another 2 more suites of predictors and criteria. One on ethical privacy, which is distinct from legal privacy in terms of European GDPR and data protection. And the other one on responsible governance. If you remember the 7 principal areas of emergence in autonomous systems as far as ethical properties goes, governance and ethical privacy are included. And ethical privacy is an ethical perspective on respect for people's private space. It's not a legal perspective of what you do with people's data and what you're allowed to do and the kind of violations. So we currently have also a training program developed and delivered to a large body of people. We potentially have a few hundred people who have gone through this training over the past 3-4 years since I first wrote the initial training, and now it's developed by IEEE partners globally, and you can go to IEEE website and see the delivery program, etc. And the training program covers many aspects. The other side was how to share some of this legacy with the global community. So after a bit of a struggle, I apologize for this, I came up with the title of ontological specifications. And the idea was we need to tell people, when we talk about ethical privacy, what are the parameters, what are the exam questions, basically. If they came to IEEE for certification, what kind of questions we'll be asking. So there is a publication called Ontological Specification for Ethical Privacy, which is available on Creative Commons license, similar one for bias, similar one for ethical transparency, a similar one for ethical accountability, and one also prepared for responsible governance of AI and autonomy. Most of these have been published already. I think the last one would be this responsible governance. So where we are now, we've got these 5 suites of systematic, smart, ethical requirements that can help us measure various ethical properties of AI-based implementations. But in terms of how these interact with realities of industry, specific sectors, etc., these are regarded as horizontal. So we have a horizontal transparency, which means that it's not about a specific practice of transparency in health or finance or education or defense. It is a universal set of transparency, and the process that we have got allows this horizontal stuff to be converted into a vertical. So we can take our universal transparency criteria and within a matter of 3-4 months with a panel of experts convert it into transparency in, say, autonomous driving or financial services or health applications, etc. We had a use case in the city of Vienna. Unfortunately, because of time, I noticed I need to rush this a bit. And we successfully certified the city of Vienna as the first global city that was rolling out AI-based services for its citizens, and they were concerned about ethics of what they were doing. And we piloted our system on Vienna, and they received the first global certificate of ethics for any city rolling out its social program for its citizens in terms of ethics. We have taken a particularly human-centric global ecosystem perspective. We haven't just focused on we need some metrics or we need some standards. We've really taken a big picture view, and the other side of this big picture is what about the key actors? What about people who need to assess ethics, audit it, I don't know, advise it, be consultants, be trainers, be officers, etc. So we have developed a competency regime which also receives IEEE accreditation and authorization alongside. Since this is a technical community, I'd like to quickly mention something about the certification and the mark that IEEE has developed for this ethics certification program called Certified with AIE, AI Ethics, capitalized towards the end of certified. So we got a 4-stage process for certification. People make an inquiry. We conduct what we call an ethics profiling. If they are interested, they go down the assessment and later certification. So we have developed what we call an agile ethics profiling process. This is all about after somebody, a global developer, SME, or major corporation shows interest in having the ethics of their product or service evaluated, we conduct this activity, which is a collaborative effort between ethicists and technologists and the client in the sense. So it's a short effort, roughly 3-4 days of activity, which establishes the context of application, the values at work, and basically helps determine a kind of an ethics profile for that product, which helps us understand, is the main focus of this product on privacy in terms of its ethical impact, or is it on accountability or whatever, and how deep is that impact? So it's almost like a spectral ethical analysis. There is a whole set of guidelines that I have written for this ethics profiling process, and because it's an agile process, it applies to everything. So before people go for proper assessment and certification, they are often given this profiling to open their eyes to the realities. They can choose whether they want to go down the certification or not. And there is also an output, an outcome called a profiling report, in which they see the collective views of IEEE experts and partners who are experts, and their own engineers and scientists and philosophers and ethics advisors, etc. So this is, if you like, the first bill of health or roadmap for ethical assessment. Then they can choose whether they would like to go down the path of a more detailed evaluation and assessment and certification, or they're just happy to have this as an interim outcome. Anyway, we currently have a complete process. Then we've got the criteria, we've got the standards, we've got a competence regime for assessing and authorizing and accrediting anyone who operates in IEEE's ethical AI ecosystem, from assessor to advisor to consultant, etc. Going back to a global scene again, everyone wants to regulate it. It's just a question of what is the nature of that regulation and how shall we do it. Most agencies do call for some form of legal intervention in the context of AI deployment. And there are various initiatives in the US, bipartisan legislation on Bill of Rights, as well as a training act for AI leadership, and then the Algorithmic Accountability Bill in the US that actually focuses on degree of accountability and social impact. Then we have got the famous European AI regulations that was finally approved by the European Council and the Parliament only a few weeks ago. So this is going to soon be enforced, of course, through a number of years of grace period for member states of the European Union. And this is a risk-based regulation. Not to forget that in the UK, we also have a government strategy on AI that's basically treats control and regulation of AI at sector level rather than at technology level. And Europe is taking the technology perspective rather than sector perspective. And interestingly, if you look at the components of UK government's strategy, they are demanding that AI applications should be safe, secure, transparent, fair, subject to responsible governance, and also allow a degree of contestability. Many of these you have seen, we already have in the IEEE suites of ethical metrics and criteria. So within reason, the IEEE portfolio of AI ethics potentially covers 90%, if not more, of the UK strategy. Just to wrap up, and I apologize that it took longer than I had anticipated, that there are significant uncertainties with this technology, which is regarded the greatest innovation of mankind, transformative in nature. and to be fair, both positive and negative. It's not all doom and gloom. It's bringing huge potential for positive change. At the same time, could undermine our rights, could undermine our social and ethical values, and the old-fashioned machinery of corporate social responsibility is no longer adequate for just saying, oh, we've got a CSR policy that applies to our AI. And the other side of it is that wherever we are facing with major uncertainties, including the social impact of current and future AI variations, robotics, automation, autonomy, etc., we need some form of independent, competent scrutiny. Some independent organization needs to have a look and give assurance. We can't just go and say, leave us. We know what we are doing. We are a big corporation. We have an ethics department and a bunch of gurus here. Independence is significant, and hence the role of institutions such as IEEE and other emerging global institutions in this independent scrutiny. Our advantage is that we have started long time ago, 6-7 years ago, with a whole suite of standards and metrication for objective measurement of ethical properties, which have not been so simple so far. And we believe that ultimately ethical assurance is the foundation of social and civil society trust in AI and any complex technology based on it. Thank you very much for your attention. There are some links that I'm happy to share at some stage, whoever is interested, but I apologize for a bit of a lengthy intro. And this is just an introduction. You can imagine the training program we run runs over 4 days for deeper insight into all of these facets that I have just skimmed through, basically. Thank you, Keely, and over to you.
Thank you so much. And I know we've only got a few minutes left. I'm going to take a question. I've got quite a few questions, but we won't get through them all of them. So one question from Colby is, how long can an organisation expect an assessment process to take place?
Well, that's quite a smart question, pragmatic one. I was involved in the past in system safety certifications for quite a while before I got involved in this particular program. So knowing that how expensive and lengthy the assessment and certification is, sometimes in excess of a year or so at enormous cost, I introduced this two-phase thing. We do a profile, you decide if the social impact is low, you don't need certification. If the social impact is high, then go down the path of detailed assessment, and detailed assessment and certification is now most likely delivered as a service by IEEE authorized partners. But in terms of how long, it depends on complexity and scalability of the system you have in mind. If it's a wearable device, it's certain lengths. If it's a networked chat GPT type device with global accessibility, much longer. So it's very difficult to be sensible about that. The only thing I can emphasize is that we split this assessment and certification into a quick scrutiny, similar to when we go to see a doctor and just does a quick test of our pulse and temperature and decides whether we are in a critical state or not. So we split it into that style. We do a quick evaluation and assessment. If the product is critical, then it needs to go into a more detailed scrutiny. If you want a metric, the one we did for Vienna took best part of 9 months or so of exchange of information, documentation, etc.
Wow, thank you very much. Well, it is 3 o'clock, I'm afraid, and there's been some fantastic questions coming in. So what I have done, Ali, is in the chat, I've actually put your email address on that slide, the IEEE one.
I was going to suggest that myself. Thank you very much, Katie.
Yeah. So what I would ask is loads of questions there. Please get in touch with Ali through that IEEE email address in the chat, and a recording of this will be available through the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society channels very soon, and it will be open to everybody, not just IEEE members. So definitely I encourage you to watch it again. So many great takeaways, and I'd like to thank Ali once again for taking the time today to share. What a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
My honor and pleasure. And if I may, to all the audience, we need you to take this issue seriously and be the ambassadors of ethics for the rest of humanity, folks. Join us if we can. If not, so long as you're aware and take the message to others, that's the best we can do. Wish you much luck and success with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.